Talking about how this is really the foundation of the practice, and today I wanted to get into. I usually do this one time with the class, and is to take a look at the paradigms, or I'd call it the greatest story, but the story that frames the way we look at the world. And the West has the Western civilization, which is the Judeo-Christian, the foundation of the practice. And today I wanted to get into. I usually do this one time with the class, and is to take a look at the paradigms, or I'd call it the greatest story. But the story that frames the way we look at the world. And the West has the Western civilization, which is the Judeo-Christian heritage, has a particular story or paradigm. Use the word paradigm. That's a popular word today. Or a frame. What frames the picture? You know, if you take a portrait, and you have content, and then you have a frame, okay, and then you have content, and this changes. Okay, I mean, so if you were looking at this as one of these digital picture frames, the frame stays the same, but the content changes. So the paradigm look at it as a frame, stays the same, but the history changes. You know, so in the same way that you would have but the meaning of the content depends upon the frame. You know, but so the frame stays the same, but the meaning changes, but the meaning of the content references the frame. So like a good way of this is take Fox News. As an example, Fox News is the frame, and then the content is the day's events. So the news. Okay, so you get the news, that changes, but the way it's presented stays the same. You see. So in other words, they would call that bias, or a slant, or a spin, you see, or a way it's presented. So the Fox News would be an example of news is presented in a particular paradigm or a particular point of view, but the news changes. So the news on Fox would mean one thing, but on CNN or MSNBC it might mean something else, because the way it's presented is different. In the same way that if something happens, an event happens in the room or in our life, everyone would have a different understanding or meaning of it, because every one of us has a different paradigm or different frame, the way we perceive information. So information has meaning only in reference to the way it's presented or its story that holds it. So in the same way that so what I wanted to look at here basically was to get a better understanding of how meditation and mindfulness works. Is that one problem we have in our culture is that the way we frame reality, the story that we believe is our story, does not have any place in it for meditation. So in order to understand meditation and mindfulness and why it works and why it's important, is that we need to get an understanding of the different paradigms that mankind uses in order to understand the reality that he perceives. And so these three stories here, we wanted to go into them. This is the West. This is the East. And this is the Far East, say China. Well, I'll just say Far East because it's more than China. But it will. Okay, and the names of these are, let's take a look at, before we even name them, we'll just look at the story of the world according to the Western view, which is the Judeo-Christian scientific view. We'll include science with that. And you can go to Genesis, basically, to get the outline. And the outline of creation, these are creation stories. Let's put that up here. So what we're saying here is that our creation stories are the framework or paradigm in which we understand what happens. And this goes with society, civilizations, as well as individuals. So we all have an individual creation story that is my personality, my story, my parents, my experience, and all the things that happened to me is my creation story. And then once I get that embedded in my mind as my framework, then everything that happens to me has meaning in relationship to my creation story. But this is never investigated. I mean, we never look at that. We just assume that's what reality is, you see. So I wanted to look, all right, so let's look first at the creation story of the West, specifically in Genesis. And what you have there is God or Yahweh who creates the world out of stuff, something, kind of like a potter makes a pot. And then he blows life, he makes a man out of clay, and he blows the breath of life into man and starts the whole thing going, you see. But the basic framework is God, or Yahweh, is outside of the world. He makes it. See, so he makes it. He's there before and after and during, but he isn't the world. He makes the world separate from himself. So you have this big gap here. Say not equal. Okay. So the world, which includes man, so in this framework, man and world, or let's say nature, and God are absolutely separate. No getting together. Man's not God, God's not man. God created man. Ah, hello.
Sorry.
That's okay. Just getting wound up here.
That's good.
All right,
Wound up.
Yeah, okay.
Okay.
Okay, so y'all get I just want you to get a sense of how this, and we just take this for granted. I mean, this is not, and particularly in religion, you don't question this, this is not to be questioned. I mean, it's just like what we stand on, but it's basically a story or a way of seeing the fundamental framework of our world, you see. So this whole idea then of God being totally separate in being from man and nature is just like fundamental to this we'll say paradigm or mythology. Mythology is a funny word because basically if you're not religious you will say mythology, but if you're talking about my religion, that's not mythology. Because we kind of like, well, mythology is just fantasy that some primitive people used because they weren't smart. But mythology is basically a metaphorical way or story way of understanding reality. Okay, so we have this idea of the potter who makes the world out of stuff. So this basically, man in nature is material, right? So it's, and the body down here. And so then we associate nature, material, or matter and body as being just atoms or stuff, whatever that is, or in other words, it's kind of not alive, or conscious. It's not conscious. So then God, who breathes life, makes this whole thing alive, you see, is separate from it. So if you want to get from this view, you see, is that, and you can see this in the a lot of the Christian religious way of looking at it, is that nature is fallen. In other words, the body is not a good thing to invest in because the body dies. I mean, this is the interesting thing about, you get past 50, you begin to notice that the leaves are turning red. You know what I mean? And winter's coming, the hair grays, so you don't want to invest in that because the thing's going to die. So where do you go if you don't want to die? Well, you don't go to the body. You go in this direction. So now so you want to get hooked up with God, and then of course you would have a place that is safe from death, which would be heaven, and you would get there by being good here, basically, and you get to there, and you're free from death by getting there, which is in the future. So, future, okay. So you kind of like get the feeling for this, that this body, this material, this pot that God made the world out of, is lacking or can't be trusted, has no intelligence, it's a funny thing, but if you watch YouTube, if you watch, particularly on Facebook, I'm on Facebook a lot. Are you on Facebook? Okay, well, go to become my friend, Ed Connolly, and you'll see me there, Blackstone. Okay, because I write my observations on Facebook, kind of like, but one thing I've noticed. And we see them on TV now because news programs are using internet videos for their CBS or whatever. So we're full of animal videos about animals doing intelligent, emotional things. I just saw one this morning where a baby elephant gets washed down the stream and the mother goes after and gets the baby and acts very intelligently in trying to say this. Or you get cross-species interaction where a lion takes care of a rabbit. Instead of eating the rabbit, now the lion is, taking care of the rabbit. Or whatever these little stories, we go like, wow, we love it. So it's almost like it's describing a reality that is not supposed to happen, because in the traditional reality of lions eat lambs. Lions don't take care of a lamb. you know. Animals don't have emotional lives. You know, a lot of Western science has excluded anything other than man to have an emotional, conscious emotional life. You know, so animals are just kind of like behavior. You know, survival of the fittest, they're just like behavior, you know. And suddenly these videos are showing animals to act intelligently, have an emotional life, they love, they cry, they grieve. Wow, they're just like us. This is kind of like blowing this paradigm apart, you see, because in this paradigm, nature, which is all the animals, are just kind of like following laws of determinism, you know, survival of the fittest, all that, nature tooth and nail, they just eat each other. They don't care for each other, they just eat each other. You know, this whole is shifting, and because we feel it, you know. So when we see a little video of the wolf taking care of a rabbit or whatever these little things are, we're heart, oh, how sweet, you know. Oh, we just, you know, we make a connection, you know. And people that have pets, I don't know, how many people here have a dog or a cat? No? Oh, get one. You know, anybody who has a pet, particularly a dog or a cat, will tell you, of course my pet has an emotional life. You know, I talk to it, I relate to it, you know. Don't tell me that it's just a dumb, unfeeling, you know, robot, you know. It just eats and sleeps and feeds, you know. That. Yeah, so this paradigm is very shaky now. But the basic problem with it, well, anyway, just to continue, that science fell right into this paradigm, because then you have, in the Middle Ages, this paradigm here enclosed Western civilization in a dome. It's like that TV show, The Dome. You know, the mythology of the Middle Ages, which was, there is heaven is up there, hell is down there, man is in between, and our sole duty is to get there and stay out of there. You know, that was the whole point, you know. So they built great cathedrals, the Gothic cathedrals, which were doorways to getting there. So if you go through a Gothic cathedral, you would always go through, see, it might be a huge thing, you know, a huge Gothic cathedral, but it would be a little doorway like that, which looked like the entrance to a womb, you know, or a cave entrance. So you would go through that, you see, and you go into the Gothic cathedral, and they would open up, you know, with the beautiful architecture and the stained glass windows, and you would be it would be like you would be inside God, you see. You know, so this was more or less, these Gothic cathedrals, I don't want to get off on that too much, but took an investment of a whole civilization to make a Gothic cathedral, the same kind of investment that we did for the moonshot. You know, we sent a man to the moon. It took us 10 years of our whole society invested our treasure in going to the moon. Well, they would spend 60 years or 100 years building a Gothic cathedral that took as much treasure as our moonshot, you see. So they were going to heaven through the Gothic cathedral, where we're going to space in a rocket. So see the different paradigm there? You know, so in the Middle Ages, there was no, the Earth was the center of the universe. That's why Copernicus blew their story apart. But in the Middle Ages, God and man and Earth was the center. So that when God created the Earth, He created the Earth as the center of the universe, right? And then all the planets and suns and everything revolves around the Earth. You see. And God was the creator who was outside of it, you see. So this was their paradigm, and then when Copernicus said, well, they invented lenses, they invented a lens so you could look up there and say, well, he discovered that factually, mathematically, the Earth revolved around the sun. Well, that common sense, our common sense view would say that the sun revolves around the Earth because it rises up, rises up there and it goes over and goes down there. So that's common sense. Well, then the telescope went against common sense and said it was just the opposite. So that really just cracked this whole Middle Ages story apart. But how did science come into this? Science fit into this paradigm, but what science did was that you have nature but you didn't need a personal, in other words, you had laws of nature. In other words, the one thing about the Judeo-Christian idea of God was that he is the lawmaker. Right? So this is moral laws. If you're going to get to heaven, you got to have, well, what do you have to do? Well, then you have to obey the moral law. So you want to do good and you want to avoid bad. And if you do good and avoid bad, well, then you get to go to heaven and you get to be free from death. But if you do bad, then you're going to hell, and you're going to not only, the Middle Ages pictures of hell were not pleasant places. I mean, it was eternal roasting. So you didn't want to go there. And the paintings of heaven, the harps and the whole thing was up there, So this was a very frightening place, Earth, because if you made one wrong decision, you were going there instead of there, you see. I mean, it's very scary. You're just walking on thin ice all the time. If you really believed that if you make a immoral, if you do a bad act, you're going to, like the door is going to fall out from under you and you're going to drop. Jonathan Edwards, the Puritan speech, famous New England, one of his famous speeches was that we're all just hanging over the pit of hell by a thread, and it's just God's whim that keeps us from falling into it, you see. That's a scary place to be, So basically science came along and said, well, there are, in addition to moral laws, there are natural. Now, this comes from the Greek. So we're a mixture of Greek and Hebrew. Where had a used a reason to understand. So they believed that the world, and they called it logos. In other words, that the world was run by laws, natural laws. So what the Judeo-Christian think, well, the world has natural laws, but God is a personal God, so he can change them if he wants to. So that's where you would petition God to change the laws so it would work for you. So if the laws of nature were saying, well, it was a drought, well, then you would ask God to bring the rains. So that would require changing the natural laws, you see. So in this paradigm of the Middle Ages, which still exists today, is that if you want to make nature go your way, you have to ask the Creator for special consideration. To change the laws in your favor. It gets kind of ridiculous now because then both football teams are praying to God for him to intervene and make the game go their way. And God's saying, well, I don't like the Redskins, so we go. So Tampa's going to win. This anyway. But they're operating within this paradigm. And I'm not getting into whether prayer works or all that, but I'm basically trying to understand the way we understand the world. So then the rational So after the Middle Ages collapsed, you see, then how did you get in tune with, how did you get in alignment with reality and make it work for you? Well, you would use reason instead of faith. So reason said, well then if you just use and that's when the scientific method came up. So then if you just observe reality without having a bias, you will discover a natural law. And if you understand the law, you can change the way reality goes and you can make stuff. So you can using reason, what God gave man. So basically science, but nature is still the same nature, is still dumb and without emotional intelligence or anything. So nature is still just matter made up. So then they went in to find out, well, what is the ultimate matter? They thought atoms was, and then they found out that there's something beyond an atom, and now is something beyond the atom, and now we're down to it's just energy. So there's no stuff there. It's just energy in quantum physics, But we'll say that. But the whole idea is that science then set out to find, well, what is the stuff that's made out, what we're made out of, And now it's, well, you're made out of cosmic dust, where all the planets or all the dust of all the planets is in us, that we're made out of dust, cosmic particles and all that. But still, it's the idea that this stuff is not intelligence, that it's still stuff and something made it. Well, then, see, science,
Yay!
did you get caught in traffic?
Car trouble.
Oh, no.
We're going to have to repair shop all morning.
Oh, well, I'm so glad you were able to break here. I think that's turned around the wrong. Just sit over here.
This one okay?
Yeah, that's good. Yeah. So you kind of like get the picture. So what science did was, it didn't just say there is no God. It just said you don't need him. If you want to predict the future. Now, in this framework, well, if you want to change the future, if you want to get a better future, you ask God. Well, science said, well, we can change the future by finding the natural laws that run everything. And if I can find the laws, well, then I can change the future. And so I just there's nothing wrong with God, you just don't need him. So it just kind of like bypassed God, you said. So now we have this is what's called the secular world, right? Secular, and then over here you have, we see this today. This is the Republican Party. This is the Liberal Party. So Liberal Party basically would call these. In other words, the Republican Party has kind of like morphed into the political party that is the one in charge of moral laws. So Republican leaders are the ones who are moral leaders. Well, you can't have abortion, you can't have all these things because these are sins or against God's law, you see. So now the Republican Party has become kind of like the ambassador or emissary, you see, of God's moral universe. And the liberals have kind of like been the ambassador of the secular universe, which doesn't depend upon personal, the moral, the king of the universe. So this party is more interested in changing conditions. If you have poverty, it's not because the poor are evil or stupid or lazy. Poverty is not a moral failure. Poverty is a condition, it is created by conditions. And if you understand what the laws are that create the conditions of poverty, you change the laws, you change the conditions, and you remove poverty. This view in the fundamentalist says, well, it's an individual's moral responsibility, not, if you're poor, it's because you are somehow not in alignment with the laws of God, and it's your fault. So you just pull yourself up by your bootstraps and go ahead and get a job. In other words, and there's truth in that, so there's truth in both sides, but they're kind of like divided. But anyway, we're developing this idea or the way things are framed, and the main point is that's really fundamentally different from the other views is that nature and the body are fallen or lacking in intelligence. And the body is full of pus and fluids, and it dies, and it gets nasty, and it gets sick, and it stinks, and you just don't want to invest in it. You want to get farther away than you can, and God then becomes mind or / spirit. So then there's this separation in our Western worldview that you can't trust the body. You can't trust your own inner sense of what's right and wrong. You have to get in alignment with the truth, which is given to you through religion, God or the church or the priest or whatever. So the body, you don't go to the body for salvation. You go to God for salvation or spirit. But that's not your own body, you see. So all this is breaking up in our society now, and it's very confusing. All the New Age, all the yogas and the meditation and all the self-help and all of these things that are coming into our society are redirecting our attention to the body. That the wisdom is there. Like you don't go listen to the pharmaceutical. Well, like my wife, for instance, she has diabetes type 2, I think, and so she the sugar was up too high, and so she went to the doctor. Says, "Well, we got a new medicine that's really good. Here, it's $400 a month, after $200 after copay." We couldn't afford it, so she said, "Well, I'm just going to, I'll bypass that, right?" So she's bypassed God, the pharmaceutical industry. See, this is what I mean? So our cultures, well, who's God? Well, they know. They're the experts. You just obey them. You obey the doctors and the pharmaceutical company, you see. Don't listen to yourself. Don't trust yourself. You see. Go see how it gets separated. So what she did was started taking a journal of what she ate. So every day, 3 times a day, she'll do a little blood sugar thing, and she writes down what she ate. And she figured out exactly what was causing the sugar to, boom, go up. If she had an extra cookie or a piece of bread instead of rye bread, or whatever, there it would go, boom. So she just started balancing. Well, if I eat that piece of bread, I won't eat this, So she began to manage her own sugar, and brought it right back, boom. You see, and the doctor was just dancing. He was so happy, that she had done this, without just obeying the drug company. I'm not saying that drugs are not beneficial, but I'm just saying that there has to be a balance. No, it's not all, I got nothing, you got everything. So anyway, you can see this today with the internet, and we're all witnessing a breakup of this very old paradigm of being, that man is fallen and he's sinful and he just can't do anything. He needs God, he needs the authority, he needs the church, he needs the priest, he needs the guru or whatever to tell him what to do, because he's fallen and whatever, So this is kind of like a picture of that. And now, all right, so now let's go to these 2 stories here, one from India and one from the Far East, primarily China. Now, these 2 stories are coming into this, you see, up into the 50s. This was pretty much, in the 50s, I highly recommend Mad Men on Netflix. I didn't watch the original series, but I have it on Netflix now, and I've already watched it once. Now I'm watching it again. Because it really is a epic of modern America as it was in the 60s, and how this paradigm really was strong in the 50s and up until the 50s. More of the, not so much the religious part, but the secular, rational part of it. With the 60s, then the religious conservative element came back in, but it's still the same paradigm. But that Mad Men is really like a modern epic to me. It's like a modern epic in the same way that Homer's Odyssey is, or the Iliad, or the romances of King Arthur. You know, these ancient epics of past societies. Every society had its own epic. India has its epic on the Mahabharata. You know, I mean, these great epic stories of civilization which tells the story of a people. So the Jews' epic would be the Bible. That's a history of the Hebrew people. Greeks had the Iliad and the Odyssey, which was their epic stories, and Rome had the Aeneid. And every civilization has its epic, you know. Well, we're not writing print epics anymore. Now our epics are on film. And Mad Men is I view it kind of like as an epic of modern American society as it changed from the 50s to now, because the story takes place in 1960 and goes for 10 years to 1970, and it records very accurately the influx of these two paradigms into the Western story of reality, which was at its heyday in the 50s. If you remember, anybody here remember the 50s? I grew up, I was graduating from high school in 55. You know, so I was growing, you know, and I became an adult in the middle right there. And I don't really, you know, I really don't remember that much about it, you know. I wasn't aware as I am now, you know. So it just, and you know, you go through a time like that, it's just what it was. I mean, you didn't have any reference point outside of it, you know, to understand it. You were just doing it, and it just seemed like and you watch Mad Men, and you go in and you look at everybody is smoking. And now, if you go in a room and one person is smoking, you die. You know that. And back then, I mean, everybody's just eating. The doctor's smoking while he's examining you. I could not believe it. And I did find out that they weren't smoking real cigarettes. They were smoking an herbal cigarette. Otherwise, they'd all be dead from lung cancer now. The whole cask would be dead. But anyway, yeah. So this change. So we have been witnessing. We are old enough to have witnessed the influx of these two world stories or world ideas into our Middle Ages. You know, so the 50s was kind of like our Middle Ages. I mean, it was a very rigid world in which men had their roles and women had their roles, and gays and blacks were excluded. You know, so it was basically a white man's world, and women were either wives or secretaries, mothers or waitresses. You know, so the story is about the emergence of the consciousness of women out of this role, and also the emergence of the consciousness of black people, African Americans, out of their roles that society is describing, and men too. You know, so it was a whole transitional period that happened in the 60s, which is why it was so violent and so wild and crazy, you know, and the creativity was so great. So what are these two stories, these two worldviews, you know, that cracked up our Middle Ages? Well, in India, God is not a outside creator of laws that are imposed on this clay. In this way, God is more is consciousness.
What is the
Yes.
what is the year East is connecting with the West, because it feels like now that we're in a generational move. That's what it feels like to me now, but.
When did this start?
Huh?
When did this start coming in here?
Yeah, I guess.
It started back, you could probably pinpoint it to, all right, we'll take the American, I studied literature, it was the American transcendentalists, Emerson, Thoreau, Emily Dickinson, and a number of others, and then also the Romantics, and also in England, the Romantic period would be Wordsworth, Coleridge, Yeats, all these poets, around 1800, that particular time. That was when the Upanishads were printed in English and were read by the intellectuals in the West. And the Upanishads is the ancient scripture of ancient India that is written from this understanding that the world is consciousness, that God is consciousness, and that in this, so what he does, basically, he was just being just pure awareness. He got bored, so he created a game, and he entered into it as all of the players, and then forgot that he set it up, and that was so he could be surprised to wake up, you see. In other words, the only thing, if you see, the only thing that makes life interesting to us is a surprise. Imagine see, this is the problem with heaven, is that there's no surprises in heaven. It's just the same. It's like living in Tampa. Just every day is the same. You get up in the morning.
How do you know?
How do you what?
How do you know?
How do you know what?
It's the same.
You just look out the line. My uncle lived there, and he would always, it's beautiful here. It's 75 degrees, 80 degrees, sun shining, no rain. What's your weather like? It's perfect here. I have a friend of mine who lives in Las Vegas, right? And he sends pictures from his thing. Every day is the same. Good palm trees, clear sky. Nothing changes. No seasons.
And
What?
I think she meant heaven. How do you know? Heaven's the same.
Oh, heaven's the same.
Yeah.
Well, there's no death in heaven, right?
No.
So there's no surprises.
No.
I'm just saying that what makes life tolerable is a birthday surprise, is a surprise.
Yeah.
If we had no surprises, just imagine, for instance, what life would be like if there was nothing to break what I know. Everything would be the known, and there would be no. A surprise is an unknown. You see what I mean? If there's no surprises, it means everything is the same as it was yesterday. If there's a surprise, then something is different. Yeah.
Heaven is just something you look forward to be good in your own way.
Yeah, whatever you want it to be. I'm not saying there's no heaven. I'm just saying that it's not a place. But if we imagined a place, it would be the way it's pictured, particularly in the middle.
People, it's comforting
Yeah.
to go. That's the answer.
Yeah, I'm not getting into there's no heaven. I'm just saying that particularly in the Middle Ages, if you look at the portraits of the masters, heaven was a place where you had angels playing with cherubs, and we see in the movies, when everybody goes to heaven, it's always kind of foggy, but it's always a happy place, and there is no more death. And surprise and death are interrelated. And you see, a surprise is the death of what you know. Like, you get cancer, I'm surprised. It wasn't supposed to be that way, Or somebody in the family dies, it's a surprise because it wasn't supposed to be that way. Or you go out of here and you slip on the thing and break your arm, that's a surprise. Those are not good surprises.
Yeah, I think of a surprise as good.
Yeah, well, surprise means basically, this is not in my expectations of how things should be. And I'm surprised, you see, because something is either good or bad. And whether it's good or bad is the way it fits into my story.
The way you foresee it.
Yeah, and usually as time goes on, what was a bad surprise turned out to be the best thing that happened to you. You know, because boy, if I hadn't gotten divorced from that idiot, I would not be in this position right now, you see. Or if I hadn't met that fool, I would not be here, you see. So thank you. But at the time, it was like, oh my God.
What happens to a person's mind when they don't see a surprise?
Right.
Surprise. I'm not surprised at anything that happens nowadays because everything is so. I mean, anything
I know
can
what you,
happen.
I know what you mean. Yeah.
Finish my thought.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, it's just.
Well, all right. Well, we'll come back and see if we can pick up on that. But let's get an idea of God as the actor, and a good analogy would be a method actor who maybe Marlon Brando or somebody who's and this was the whole idea behind method acting was that you became the character. And it wasn't like you were John Wayne playing. John Wayne always played John Wayne. You see, but then you have Kelsey Spacey or Meryl Streep. Now, she becomes the character, and you can't even tell who is Meryl Streep. I don't see Meryl Streep. I see Queen Elizabeth, or whatever she's playing. You see, so she becomes that personality. Now, what happens if she forgot that she was Meryl Streep? You see. So now there's gonna be a surprise, and now she's going around playing the character out of context. When she goes home, my father was like that. All right, so he invested in being a captain in the Navy. Well, before that, that was what his retired rank was, but he's an officer in the Navy, with all the respect and the power that's entitled to that. And so when he was home, he was still captain. You see, and so I was the seaman. You can't mop. You're not doing that for. Give me that mop. And my mother was the executive officer who waited on the captain.
Professional.
Don't make him mad.
What he said.
Right, yeah. And so whenever there was any conversation, it was the captain holding forth, and everybody just nodded their head. You're so right. I guess that's why I'm here. I'm just holding forth like my father. But you can disagree if you want. I won't throw you out. So anyway, it's the idea of God. And this is a very simple way of presenting it, but it's kind of like the basic behind it is that God is the absolute, eternal, deathless self, or formless. Okay, so God is the eternal, formless consciousness, and then He creates form. And evolution unfold. This is a living creation. It's not like bang, the whole thing is done. You see, this paradigm here says that God created the earth in 7 days, and then I'm done with this baby. So then He just sits back and watches this clock run. That was the world that the Thomas Jefferson and the people of the Enlightenment saw. They were called deists, But it was after the scientific revolution. So God was kind of like a clockmaker. He made this thing, created the laws, wound it up, takes a nap. So now we're in this thing and we have to figure out how this clock works. Kind of like that. But He's out, But then the religious point of view says, no, He's still active. He can still fix the clock. You just have to ask Him. He'll fix that clock. So there's two different, ways here, but the idea is the same. God is still outside. He's not the clock. Here, so God is the clock. He made the clock out of Himself, entered into it, and then forgot. And that creates the game. So now God is waking up all the time. like Meryl Streep goes home and or my father goes home and suddenly he wakes up and realizes that that the captain was a role, that he was playing a role, you know. Of course, in my own is that me or you?
No.
I remember when I was usually back in the 70s, I hung out with some spiritualists for a while. And the spiritualists were people who are always looking for God's affirmation. Like, God is there, and you're always looking for a sign that He is listening or in tune with you. So right then, you see, I said, if I was a spiritualist, I see God just sent that, that little bell. Said, that we're in tune, He's listening. But anyway, so that fits my story. If I were to say that would be here. Say, oh, it's just a bell rang, you know.
Right.
But my story would be, oh, God sent God. That's God tuning in and letting me know that we're in tune, because I just said something that's true.
Yeah, it's like my mother-in-law, who was such a religious person. She believed he would drop silver things in the house.
Yeah. Watch. Yeah, you got change? Go ahead. I'll stick the microphone in this drink. So, are we back on? Okay. So when did he break out of his role? When did he forget?
You got bells ringing somewhere.
Oh. All right, I have to tell you, if you wait on the laundry detergent, it will be $3 cheaper next week.
You wrote yourself a memo.
No, that's my wife sending me a message for the Costco trip. It wasn't God.
Yes, it was. I thought your phone was giving you a memo.
Damn.
So you didn't get the laundry detergent yet.
I know. All right. So anyway, we're looking at this idea here of God as an actor who forgets that He is remember, this is not, He is the play. Now, it's like a dream. When we dream, you're the cat and the dog and you in the dream and the fields that you're running on with the cat and the dog. You're the whole works. Right? You're all the parts. So this is a dream play in which you are playing it, but your awakening ego personality is asleep. You have forgotten that you're you, and now you're in the dream. There's still an awareness. I'm aware of stuff going on, but I'm asleep. This is the model that we're looking at here. So now I wake up. Somebody come and wake up. I wake up. That was a dream. You see? Now I'm awake. So this is the basic model here for all of these practices of meditation, yoga, inquiry, whatever the story or tradition is. There are many different traditions, but whatever they are, they're all going towards waking up. You see? Waking up to truth, waking up to who I am, waking up to reality, waking up to the facts, waking up to the phoniness, waking up to my illusion. I really believed in that guy, and now, yeah, he's a bum. You see? It's all about waking up, you see. This is a completely different, understanding here. So this, so there's this idea of being asleep to the reality and waking up to reality, and it's always a surprise. You see, I'm surprised by that, Whereby I thought I knew what it was, I'm surprised. I didn't know. There was something missing, So that, so this is the cosmic, it goes all the way down from the cosmic story of God as consciousness creating the world and then going to sleep as the world in it, and then waking up to that, you see. So but he used natural laws in order to create the world, so you had evolution. So man evolved to the point where he had a brain and a mind that could wake up. So all of the mystical experiences in the Bible and in all the religious traditions are about the sage or the prophet or the mystic waking up to cosmic consciousness or God consciousness or Christ consciousness or Buddha consciousness or Allah consciousness, whatever the particular story you put God in, the consciousness is formless, is beyond the story. So when we wake up then, we all put it in our story. If I were Hindu, the waking up would be put in the context of Krishna or Rama or some Hindu context. Or in China, well, let's go to China then. There's another tradition. In China you had Tao. The symbol of the Tao is the yin yang. And this is an ancient tradition that China has never been, it is an ancient civilization. So 10,000 years. Both of these traditions are 10,000 years old at least. Yoga was this tradition. Yoga is not just the little postures you do in the room. Yoga is a mystical tradition with the body postures just being ground to it, you see. So, all of these traditions here, well, all three traditions, Judeo-Christian, Hindu, and Orient, have a way. So, granted, so if you want to get to God, or you want to have God, here's another difference. In this tradition, getting to God, knowing God, getting in tune with God is relationship. Okay? This is a fundamental difference. Since God is totally separate in being from man, the only way you can get with God is to be in relationship with God. This is just taken for granted, and this would be the way of devotion. So if I'm going to be in the way I would get to relationship with God in this tradition would be in a devotional way. So I am devoted to God. So I am devoted to God in the same way I might be devoted to my husband or wife. So relationship, you see. I am not God. That, like in this tradition, if you say that, you're headed for the nut house or the stake. They burn you. In the Middle Ages did, Here you just be Ben Carson. But
What if you say that you're a co-creator with God?
Well, I know that. Okay, so that's getting out, so that's kind of like, fudging, it's getting, fudging it a little bit. I mean, we're in other words, if in this fundamental picture of the world, if God is totally different in being, there's no way for man to be anything other than dependent upon God for everything. God's the creator. Man's the created. You see, these two are pretty much ironclad relationships in this particular story. Of course, like I said, this is all breaking up now. So understand this is relationship. These two paths here are paths of knowledge or gnosis. Now, Christianity had a path of gnosis or knowledge, but the church stamped it out. Gnosis means knowledge of, right? Or this is the wisdom path, or identity. So these two paths here are waking up paths. So you wake up to your identity with consciousness. Not waking up to identity with God as a thing, where then you go around saying, well, I'm God. Everything is God. So if everything is God, you can't say I'm God and you're not. So if everything is God, which is what this story is, if God created everything as himself, and then forgot that he did it, you see, everything is interrelated in one. But we still see the world in this paradigm. This paradigm has become common sense. Common sense says that the sun rises there, sets over there, and it revolves around us. Our common sense says, God is there, I'm here, I'm not God, I'm created by God. And common sense says the world is made out of things, and I'm just another thing in the world. You see? So this is common sense. This is our Middle Ages. So here's Copernicus over here. So this came into our culture back around the turn of the century. Well, now it was 1900. I'm not exactly when, but Vivekananda was a Hindu saint or mystic, and he came to this country and lectured, turned everybody on. Theosophical society went Europe, and everybody was turned on to this philosophical system. It's non-dual. This is a dual system, God and man. This is a non-dual system, God and man are one. And it's our purpose to see that, awaken to that, you see. But again, we're screwed up in our culture because we think of God as a thing.
What if we don't think of it as a thing?
Well,
What if you think of it as a spirit?
that's a thing too.
That lives within each person individually.
Okay, well now you're getting closer to everything is spirit then. In other words, or do we say then, see, we keep fudging the two. We say, well, I'm a thing with a spirit in me, but I'm still a thing. But this says, no, the whole thing is, in other words, and we really have to, this. If we meditate on this, just if you just sit, if you'll notice that none of us have heads. No, I look at you. Head, you got a head, you get a head, you see. But I don't have a head. I can't see my head. You can't see your head. So you are just awareness I see my body. Here's the thing. I can name it, a hand, fingers, ring, the whole thing, right? But I don't see my head, So like I'm a headless person with just consciousness here, right? And so everything here, I look out the window, everything as far as I can go, everything is inside this consciousness, even this body. See, I'm just shifting the way you look here. So there is consciousness, which is no form at all, formless awareness here in your empty head, and you can look around and you see a body, right? And you see arms and things, and it's all named. Arm. If you study medicine, you can name every sinew, every blood vessel, right? Study physics, you get every atom, every little, everything is named. Everything is known by the mind. It's called name and form. Everything is named, everything has a form, but it's all created by my mind. But then behind that name and form, you see, is just awareness, because I'm aware of names and forms. So you have names and forms, everything's named, table, Virginia, everything, and then if you stop on it, you can reveal a history. So if we sat and talked, you see, then we would have your history, and you can name all the things that happened, you see. So each one of us is kind of like a center that has expanding ripples of names and forms in the past, in the history, and the future, what I hope, and all this, you see. But behind it all is this headless, empty, formless awareness, you see. And that's the center of, each one of us is the center of the whole cosmos.
Is that what they call center of gravity? Just you find yourself to the center of gravity, because of center yourself?
Yeah, if you're finding, yeah. So in other words, this, there are many ways to look at this. So basically, this whole idea behind here, you see, is awakening. This is a core. This is a core idea to this paradigm here. There's no awakening over here. There's belief. I believe in the Nicene Creed. I believe in the apostles. I believe in the church doctrine. Whatever the church I'm in, you see, I believe these things. And my belief then puts me in relationship with God, which ensures me a good life or heaven or whatever, you see. Or whatever I want, you see. But it's the belief that puts me in relationship with God, you see. Belief does not come into these. But let me go back to this one here just to finish this up, because these are different, but they come together. Now, if you watch Star Wars, this was the paradigm for Star Wars. It's called the Force. Okay, the Tao means the watercourse way, or a way. So if you're in the ocean and you're in the doldrums in your ship, you're a sailing ship, and the sails are flapped, just hanging there, and you're thirsty, you're not moving. This is a famous metaphor sailing ships had. You're in the doldrums. My life is not moving. Nothing's happening. My dreams are all fading. I'm just treading water, waiting to die, just sitting here watching soap operas. Nothing is moving, But, that kind of feeling, that I've lost my current, I've lost the way. So the way is kind of like a felt.
You have to feed it yogurt.
Force would be like the quantum energy of the universe, kind of.
Well, you can name it. There are all different ways of naming it. But what we're working on now is a feeling. Okay, because this whole practice here is very personal. It's a felt practice and not an intellectual, philosophical practice where you name it all and you got a system and I got a textbook and I know everything in this. I'm an authority because I know everything in this book. You see, it's not about that's okay. But there's another dimension to this practice over here, other than just studying scriptures and learning what's in the scripture. See, both the scientist and the priest are the same way, in the sense that the priest in this system, and in this too, they would, in other words, to get to God would be to learn everything in the book. And then you become an expert. So if you're a scientist, you learn everything to do in your science to become an expert. Or if you're a priest or a minister, you learn everything in the scriptures. So now you have knowledge of the scriptures. But that is not this kind of knowledge over here. This knowledge over here is personal experience. So the mystics, the religious people in this system are more like shamans.
More like what?
Shaman.
What's that?
A shaman is a witch doctor.
A witch doctor.
In the sense that a witch, well, all right, so I was just watching Longmire. Anybody ever see that? My wife found it, and it's on Netflix now. But anyway, it's about a sheriff on the edge of an Indian reservation, and they have to go into the Indian reservation, but it's off limits to the sheriff because it's on the reservation. And anyway, there was a medicine woman at the top of the hill. You had to cross a river and everything, and she was up there, had a big medicine wheel on the ground, and she had different magical potions on. But the medicine woman, you know, or the medicine man. This idea. This is a yogi. The idea here is that and this is the idea in American Indians. In other words, every individual has to have a quest, and you get an animal, you get a special name, and you go on an individual quest. In Native American would be to find your animal totem. So you would have a vision. You know, you're going to be a hawk or a bear or whatever. You would have a vision of your totem animal, and there would be a knowledge or a union with nature. You see, so it's a way of being united with nature. In this tradition, you don't want to get united with the nature because it's just stupid, dumb stuff. It's just no intelligence there, you see. This paradigm here is nature is intelligent, it is consciousness, and that you need to get in tune with it in order to feel the force. You see, so this is a felt. So we have moments of this, but we don't really understand it or have any way of fitting it into our life because our common sense says it's just a coincidence. You see, so when we feel the current or the way, we're enlivened by it, and it may change our life, but it doesn't. There's no Velcro for it to stick on. It just kind of like falls off. Because this is a very powerful story here of reality. The whole culture enforces this story. So if you're moving over in this direction, people here think you're nuts. Because you're operating from a different story that there is, it doesn't fit common sense.
Just like what Copernicus was.
Pardon?
Just what Copernicus, the sun revolves around Earth.
Yeah.
How
Copernicus, yeah.
was viewed as
yes.
at that time is exactly
right. He's crazy. Right. A threat, you see. Bernie Sanders. It's challenging our common sense of the way our economy, capitalist system should work, you see. So he's questioning whether the way our system is working right now is the truth, you see. So he's saying, wake up, Trump is coming kind of like from a shaman. A shaman is the this goes back to the cave dwellers, to the original human beings. The wise person was a shaman. A shaman is one who goes off by himself on a quest and has personal experiences or gnosis, and then he comes back to society with his wisdom, and he helps society. He becomes a wise person. He becomes a portal for God or truth, you see. He becomes a personal vehicle then for for the rest of society, so he becomes like a center, But the whole point of it, so he is, his in this system, the spiritual leader or the spiritual leader, wise person, is one who has personal gnosis or experience of waking up to his true nature. Where this system would rely more on the spiritual teacher having belief and a powerful belief and knowledge of Scripture. But he may not have any personal experience. You see? In other words, it would be like a person who studies yoga or studies Buddhism, whatever. They become an expert in it, but they still go home and beat their wife. No personal change. I know everything, but my life is still miserable. My personal life, you see. I go home and, whatever. So there, in sciences like this, you can be a scientist and study and know everything in science, but your personal life is still a mess. You see, there's no personal transformation. So this is all about personal transformation, not learning stuff. You see. So there's a real, shift. The whole shift, as we talk about this, there's a whole shift to this idea of the self.
Did you say not learn stuff? If we think in this way?
This is not really, it's more or less not thinking this way, but it's like being, and it's pretty hard. I'm just trying, what we're looking at here is how the influence of these two world stories have come into our culture, like Copernicus came into the Middle Ages. It's just shaking everything up. It's a complete shift in emphasis. It doesn't say this is wrong. It just says this is not the whole story.
Well, that's what I was, I guess, saying. I feel that we're in a generational change right now in our society.
Yeah.
And
We're transitional. Right.
Transition, but if there's a part over here of people just won't, they won't wake up.
They're clinging.
They're what?
Clinging, holding on.
Because I had my cousin just 2 weeks ago, because we have these conversations back and forth, and I'm over here, and they're over here. And she asked me, don't you feel funny about when you're with all these people and they're thinking this way and you're way over here thinking this way? I said no, because sorry, I'm over here. See.
Okay.
But I couldn't explain it.
Yeah. Right.
Because I have, during our course of conversations, I thought that I was explaining myself, but I really wasn't, because they just didn't get anything I said.
Right.
Because I'm over here trying to. Yeah. Okay.
I understand. Well,
It makes me feel better now.
this is not. This is a felt. In other words, we're getting back here. All right. So this story here denies the body of any wisdom. The mind has wisdom, spirit and mind.
But doesn't it mean that this over here is going to win out over this over here, because things change?
No, but this
I mean, not win completely, but how about the young people that are coming along? They're not totally hung up on this side, are they?
No.
They're more over here on these two. So.
Well, we look at our culture, and we have a good, we've been around long enough, to see the beginning, or when we were, in other words, what it was, and we can see what's happening now. And it's very difficult to understand. A lot of people say the world is just going to hell, it's just all breaking up, but it's not. It's being born. That's what it's, so, it's a transition. Doesn't mean this is the end. We're going to fall. It's not like Columbus set up, that was the last week, the Dharma of Columbus, but it's not like Columbus. The story is, that if you went out too far, you're going to fall off the edge of the earth, because it was flat, and you'd fall off. So you don't go out there. You stay within sign of the shore, So it's kind of like that same understanding here is you don't want to leave this flat earth here, because if you go there a little bit, you're going to fall off into chaos or madness. The devil's waiting for you out there. I remember I had an evangelical sister-in-law. I learned a lot from her, but her and her husband, it was back in the 80s. And it said, well, you don't want to, you shouldn't meditate, because if you meditate, you're going to let the devil in.
Okay.
Seriously. I mean, that, you don't want to sit down there and trust the body. You've got to trust God and Scripture and authority. I mean, if you have any break in that, you see, the devil can come in through that crack. And scary stuff, you see. And people that are really locked into a particular system, and it begins to break up, they can go into psychosis, they end up, or be carried, there was a, so anyway, I mean, there's, moving back, so to recapitulate here, the two images are, one of the, in the Hindu, the primary is that God is an actor who created the world out of himself and then fell asleep in it. So now, so that's an analogy to us, going to sleep and not waking up, or becoming a character or a role, and forgetting that I'm playing a role. Like in Mad Men, there are two really strong themes there. One of them is with Don Draper, but the other one is the role of women. And Don Draper's wife, Betsy, plays the housewife of the, of course we'll say 50s, because it starts in 1960s, so she's coming out of the 50s. And so she and Don has become very successful, and he has bought a nice house in the suburbs, and he has a beautiful blonde, perky wife and two beautiful children, and he provides them with everything, and you should be happy. They have new toasters and a new washing machine. Anything that new comes along, they get it. But for her, it's a very superficial life. All she does is think about, when is Don coming home? How can I please Don? Have my dinner ready, And so Don comes in and sits down, but Don is not really there. He's always back at the office or having an affair somewhere. Because he's created the perfect wife, she's the perfect wife, the perfect husband, beautiful, good-looking husband. Everybody drools over him, everything is perfect. But she's going to a therapist. She's cracking up. Because it's superficial. She's playing a role. She's not awake. Then you have Peggy, who is she is kind of the secretary. She comes to work in the, if you don't know the Mad Men thing, it's about a ad agency in the 60s. They were called Mad Men because it was Madison Avenue. Mad Men. Yeah. So the other thread is the story of Peggy, who comes in there as a secretary, and now she's an innocent. Pigtails, she's like off the farm, she's just an innocent. She's coming in there now. Now she's been instructed on how to fit into the roles that are assigned to women in this age, which was, you're a secretary, you are a servant for the men at work, and your goal is to make the right moves and get a man and then get married and move to the suburbs. So then you can be a wife and mother at home, or a secretary here, and then you have the mistresses over here, you see. So the men, go from flirting with the secretaries as potential mistresses to having a perfect wife at home, you see, and everybody's miserable. So the men drink all the time. And the women are married women are always worried about who's my husband with, and the secretaries are all competing with each other to get one of the men. So it's a Buddha would say it's just still suffering, because everybody's asleep in expectations, in the roles, So. When is this? Is this up at 1 o'clock?
Yeah.
Okay. We're almost there. Okay. Well, anyway, so I hope you got an idea of these three paradigms, because they're all going on now at the same time. Everybody's looking for the force to feel the current. What should I do? Well, you have to feel it. You have to feel the current. Artists do this. When they get a creative idea, they've got a current, and it creates an art, you see. When we fall in love, there's a current to romantic love. Suddenly, all the romantic stories, they're resisted. Oh, don't you know you're in love? No, I'm not in love. And then finally they wake up. Oh, I'm in love. So there's an awakening, you see. But the romantic love is not relationship, but identity. Romantic love is not about relationship. It ends up in relationship. But romantic love in the thing is about being identifying with your partner to the point that you're seeing each other through your eyes. You know, so I'm seeing myself through my partner. Partner is seeing herself through me. So it's a gnosis or an identity, you know, which is ephemeral. It cannot last forever, but it creates the foundation for a relationship. But anyway, this whole idea of identity is you get that thing off. This is it's everywhere in our cultures, but we just don't have an overall way to understand it. It doesn't make any sense from this picture here. But all three are necessary. To me, it's kind of like stages of the evolution of consciousness of man. So this is a ethical relationship here, where you want to get into, it builds your character to become a moral person. That's a character building thing. I do the right thing. And what should I do? Well, I have to have rules. So, you know, children are at that stage. They have to go to Sundays. They have to learn the rules of behavior and moral behavior. So they learn the rules, you see. So this is an ethical stage here where you're learning what to do. But if you cut it off there, you see, then it becomes dysfunctional. You see, because there's more to life than just obeying the rules. You see, there's more to once you've got the rules down, well, then what do? Well, this is like sports or art. So you're going to be a soccer player. Well, first of all, you learn the rules of the game, and then at some point you drop the rules and you just spontaneously play soccer. But you're not thinking about, should I kick the ball this way or that way, you see. It's spontaneous. Now you are soccer. Or with an art, or with a piano. You learn the rules here, but at some point you drop the rules and you just start making music. And you sit down at the piano and your hands know what to do. Boom, boom, boom. Wow, look at that. Then writing. I do that that's why I like to write on Facebook, is that I'll pick some topic will come up that interests me and I just start writing about it. And I have let my fingers do the writing. So my fingers come up with interesting ideas that I had no idea I had. Oh, look what I you know. So so that's creative writing. You know, so the creativity flows in whatever medium we want, you know, whether it's talking to your neighbor or a good friend where suddenly you're saying things that you didn't know you knew or they need to hear, or it's an art, or whatever life can be. It can be creative if we surrender. If we go through this stage, we come to this stage. So then we wake up to our body, to our art, and then we surrender to the movement of our art. You see, so I'm surrendering this stage in order to allow this to take me up. So now I'm swept up by this force of my life, you see. Parents for women know this particularly. So before you're a mother, before you're a mother, or a father, you're a separate individual. But as soon as you become a parent, this force carries you away, you know. So now you are a mother or a father, and all you want to do is follow this force of life. So the child then is like the Tao. The child is the force of life that is growing in your particular care, and you want to follow it and be with it and work with it and develop it. If you come down on this side here and say, I don't want to follow this, I want to dictate what that child has to do in order to meet my approval, now we have missed the Tao. And we don't trust the child to tell me what the child needs. I know what the child needs. I'm going to fit the child, you see, into my story. And if the child doesn't fit into my story, well, then I'll punish the child. You see? So this system here is saying, well, what is I trust the child to tell me what it needs to learn. So this would be like in the role of a therapist, who is listening to what the child is saying with its body versus what it can't say with its mind, you see. So it's a whole different, all of these things are working at the same time, but they're all mixed up. And this is a kind of way to break it down, because these are very big ways of looking at the universe. And personally, I'm at a place where I can see any. I'm always waking up, and I'm always feeling my creative current, and I'm always this is a devotional part here, So if you're gonna be, if God is a beloved, see, then God is external, and you're in a devotional relationship. Whereas this way, you're one with the Father. That's what Jesus said, which got him crucified when he said, "The Father and I are one." Well, this was gnosis. The Father and I are one is not relationship; it's identity. Okay, but anyway, we're running past. You were all very attentive, and this has been a good talk. So,
Very good talk.
thank you so much.
Could you say that we are one?
Pardon?
Could you, when you say that the Father and then God, did you say?
Jesus said, "The Father and I are one."
One. Could we say that we